Hey, what's up guys? Chad here with the Reptile Rangers. Now I've got one of my little buddies, a little banana ball python. We're at the Kernersville Reptile Zoo and Medical Center again today, and we're going to talk about the next episode of just common reptile problems. We're not going to cover every medical condition like we have before, or most every medical condition. We're just going back over the most commonly dealt with problems. Now, before we get into that, right down here in this bottom corner is our subscriber button. Make sure you hit that. And for those that have, we appreciate you doing so and following along week after week after week. All right, let's get right into this. So common reptile problems, episode number 2 is going to be respiratory infection. Something that people deal with way too often, quite honestly. But a lot of the times when they deal with respiratory issues or respiratory infection, a lot of the times a little bit of incorrect keeping, okay, that really causes the respiratory infection. It really does come back to the keeper, okay, not the kept, but the keeper. Generally speaking, when we're talking respiratory infection, it's a pretty easy issue to deal with as long as it's caught fairly quickly. A lot of times you don't even have to deal with it with antibiotics as long as it's caught quickly enough. And we'll go over a little bit of that here in just a little bit. But the common respiratory infection, common respiratory issue is generally speaking caused by two things. Either there's too much moisture in the pen, you know, all the fools online preaching humidity, humidity, humidity. Humidity, too much humidity will absolutely, inside of an enclosed setting like this right here, will absolutely cause a respiratory infection just like that, okay? The other reason is, of course, being too cool. And that's the most common thing that most people think about when they think of respiratory infection is the first thing that we'll ask if somebody talks to us by phone or in person about a potential respiratory infection, is the first thing we ask, what's the temperature in the pen? Generally speaking, yes, 90% of the time, the temperature inside of the pen is going to be the cause of it. And when we see respiratory infection issues, it's going to be in late fall or throughout the winter time. And folks are like, well, I haven't changed a thing. I'm still doing the exact same thing that I was doing in the summertime. And that's great. It's great that you haven't changed anything or there's nothing that's really changed. The biggest problem is these animals can feel the temperature changes. They can feel the barometric pressure dropping. They can feel when the house, and even the house, even if you have it climate controlled, there's still a change in the atmosphere, okay? And they can feel that. They can feel the cooler temperatures. Generally speaking, the temperatures in a habitat will go down in the wintertime. So most of the time you have to up your wattage of your heating, your heat source, heating bulbs, heat emitters. If you use heat pads, then you have to just do more. You have to add lamps. I'm not a big fan of heat pads. They don't work well when it comes to like enclosure settings like these right here. It's different types of heat sources work a little bit better, especially in large ones. Heat pads and heat tape work well in rack systems and things like that. For breeding racks, they work great because they can heat up a small tub fairly efficiently. But when you're talking a nice size exhibit or a nice size habitat, heat pads ain't going to work for squat. You're just going to heat the surface. But the two key reasons that respiratory infection will come on, of course, is being too cool or too much moisture inside of the atmosphere. I want to explain this, okay? So understand something. When you're out in the wild, if you're in the Congo, if you're in the Asian rainforest, Southeast Asia, if you're in the Australian rainforest, wherever the case may be, South America, throughout the Amazon, there may be a ton of humidity, but there is still air movement, okay? Inside of an enclosed setting like this, there's no air movement. So if there's 80%, 60%, 70% humidity, then with that being said, what will happen is it's stagnant, moist air, okay? It's stagnant. It's not moving. And so they're sitting there just breathing this in all the time. Too much humidity inside of a habitat can also cause things like fungal infections, respiratory infections, bacterial infections, scale rot. Humidity can be bad for a lot of different reasons. And unfortunately, a lot of these forums, a lot of these Facebook pages are like, yeah, gotta have humidity, gotta have humidity, gotta. No, you don't. And you need to be very careful about the humidity that you do. Yes, there is some humidity that's needed, some moisture that is absolutely 100% needed. That is a fact. But when it's in an enclosed setting, it's a totally different type of humidity that can actually be much more dangerous to an animal, like these kind of animals, than what it is more helpful. So essentially, when it comes to respiratory infection, the first two things that we look at is either too much moisture or the habitat is too cool. If the habitat is too cool, then warm it up. get it to its desired optimum temperature, okay? Now, I would not tell anybody not to seek professional help, of course. If they think they have a respiratory infection going on with a snake, that's absolutely fine. Go ahead and seek medical advice. But understand that there is no profit in cures, there's profit in treatment. Human medical and animal medical. Most of the time you take an animal in for a respiratory infection, even if it's an early on stage of respiratory infection, then automatically what the vets want to do is just start throwing drugs at it. That's not always necessary. But of course they're not going to make money if they don't prescribe you things. They don't do treatments. They don't do tests. They don't do a lot of this other stuff that a lot of folks that's been in the industry for years know how to take care of just like that. Okay? Whether they're a medical professional in the industry or whether they're just a actual herpetologist or a zoologist, biologist, or they're just a long-term experienced hobbyist or breeder, and they just know how to accomplish getting rid of the respiratory infection without throwing drugs at it. So understand, yes, if you think you have respiratory infection, you need to confirm that, whether it's through somebody that's professionally known in the industry or somebody that's been doing it for a while, or you seek veterinary help. But of course, understand, vets are just instantly going to throw drugs right at it, and they're going to want to do tests, and they're going to want to throw drugs at it. So you're going to be looking $300 to $500 bill before you ever walk out the door. So that's totally up to you if you go that route. Unfortunately, that's how it works, and unfortunately, they can get away with that crap. However, there are some simple things that you can do if you do not have a vet at your access. And a lot of folks call us and they don't have an exotic vet that's even close to them. Sometimes they're multiple counties away. Sometimes they may even be 3 to 4 hours away from a good veterinary practice. And so they try and learn how to do things that can help them before they have to take that long road trip and go see a vet that may not even be able to help them in some senses, because I can't tell you how many people I've had call us that went to and got vet help that didn't even get help. And then we tell them a few simple things to do, and there you go. Again, it's all about the experience, not so much about what the piece of paper that they have says. That doesn't mean squat. It's about their experience. Now, with that being said, if you know what type of animal that you have and you know what their temperatures are supposed to be, a lot of times you can do, and vets will talk about this as well, they'll talk about doing what's called cooking it out of them along with the antibiotic injections. Cooking it out of them just means you up your temperatures about 5 to 6 degrees overall, both hot side and cold side, and you essentially are trying to dry the lungs out. You're trying to keep the infection from getting worse, and you're trying to keep the fluid buildup from getting any worse inside of the lungs. Early signs and symptoms of a respiratory infection could be things like open mouth breathing, clicking or wheezing. When you're holding it, you can feel the clicking or the wheezing inside of there. A little bit of bubbly mucus, maybe a little bit of bubbles, fluid bubbles comes out of the nose. And they sit kind of with their head in a raised position. What they're trying to do is they're trying to open the airway a little bit easier so they can get air inside of their lungs easier because there's fluid in there. So it's air and fluid trying to compete for space. And with that being said, come here, Nosy. Come here, you. So with that being said, sometimes you can just go very, very simply with just upping the temperatures, and it will allow them to start drying those lungs out, dry the atmosphere out. Because again, some of the old school mentality was some of the stupidest things I've ever heard was in a respiratory infection back in the 90s, one of the things they would say is up your temperature, up your humidity. Well, that's half right. Why are you going to put more fluid in their lungs if they already have fluid in their lungs? I mean, again, some ideology is very stupid and very foolish. But you dry them out, the atmosphere out as much as you can, aside from the water dish, and you up their temperatures a little bit. Almost 90% of the time that works. Generally speaking, when you have a respiratory infection happen inside of a breeding setting, inside of the enclosed tub, one of the things that happens is they'll get into the water dish, they'll flip that over, and then there's moisture in there. If that moisture doesn't get cleaned up fast enough, then that moisture is just sitting in there, just stagnant, moist air all the time, and they're breathing that in, and that can cause a respiratory infection fairly quickly. It can also cause scale rot fairly quickly, too, if they're sitting in that moist bedding all the time. Come here, little one. And so with that being said, another way that you can do this, a lot of your breeders and a lot of your long-term hobbyist keepers will do something called the Vicks Vapor Rub treatment. I'm not really going to explain how to do that. That's something that you can look up, or you can call if you have a need for something like that. You can call somebody that you trust that knows how to do those kind of treatments. I'm not going to explain this on here for the sake of somebody doing things incorrectly and just completely hurting their animal. But antibiotics are absolutely needed in some cases. Baytril is the world's worst thing that you could ever give to one of these, and a lot of your old school vets, that's their go-to is Baytril. It's the worst thing you can give. They can actually become immune to Baytril, not to mention the fact if it's not done correctly, it's what's called a sub-Q injection. It goes just under the skin. If it creates a bubble, if it's not done correctly, that bubble will actually turn into a blister and then an open wound, which actually there in turn creates an additional problem that you have to deal with. So Baytril is not good stuff, even though it's what the old school vets tend to go with, because Baytril was just uniformly able to be used in a lot of different antibiotic treatment situations. However, antibiotics sometimes do have to be dealt with and do have to be used when it comes to these if the respiratory infection is really bad. In cases of boa constrictors, a lot of the times we'll find that boas, when they have a respiratory infection, they'll have mouth rot at the same time. For some reason, they end up getting both. A lot of infection will build up inside the mouths and it'll start affecting the gum lines. However, in certain snakes like the Burmese pythons, we've been breeding them for years. And Burmese pythons, the albinos already come with a natural lung defect. And so they're more prone to getting a respiratory infection from just the simplest of environmental changes. So again, the reason I'm saying all this is just understand what you have, understand the type of animal you have and the type of environment that they should be in and they need to be in. And if you can mimic their natural environment as closely as possible, you're not going to have any problems. But again, remember, in enclosed settings like these right here, there is some manipulation that has to happen, because too much humidity in these, where there's no fan or there's no air movement or anything like that, can cause a respiratory infection very, very quickly. Now, I know this is a lot of information, and like I said, just giving some early signs, symptoms, just talking a little bit about respiratory infection, just one of the common problems that people deal with all the time. You can deal with a respiratory infection in summer, in fall, in winter, and in spring. Respiratory infection can happen to reptiles at any time of the year. But if the environment is typically right, it's warm enough and it's not too terribly wet, too much moisture, then you generally don't have too many problems. All right. Now, again, this is my little buddy, the banana ball python we have here in the storefront. Don't forget, we do have pets available all the time. We sell pets almost multiples daily, and happy to do so. Habitats. We do the food and all kinds of different things. So if you're ever interested in a pet, feel free and get in touch with us. Don't forget about our TikTok channel. We did start one of those. Just fun little short enjoyable pieces, not really that much education, just fun stuff to put up. And we appreciate you following along here on the YouTube channel, also entitled Reptile Rangers. The TikTok channel is entitled the same thing. Now, we appreciate you coming along with us. Make sure to write in. Let us know of other things you want us to film about. Feel free to get with us if you need anything. Our information will be in the description below. And also feel free to leave a comment. Make sure to subscribe, like, hit the bell for notification. And as always, we again appreciate you following along video after video, week after week. So we'll either see you here at the zoo or we'll see you on the next episode. Later.